All right, so here we are closing day number 23 in the account, and today is a big fat red day. I came close to breaking two records today, one for daily loss and one for biggest loss on a single trade. Now, in both those cases, it was the second worst in both categories. And I'm really not all that upset about this day, I must be honest. And maybe you'll be getting a kick out of that. A lot of the times, like on day 21, I finished up almost 9%, and I'm, beating myself up. And then here I am closing down 8.9%. And I don't really feel all that bad about it. And that's pretty typical of me. I always try to look at the other side of things and analyze the less obvious aspects of things. And in this case, after reviewing my trades, I really do feel like I didn't do a whole lot wrong today. I maybe made some mistakes pre-market on my two trades on CLVS, but the big loser was a trade on COLL, which was a $20 stock that I took a big hit on and exceeded my stop by a huge amount. I'll get to that shortly. But today was also a special day because I had a much different setup in front of me than I normally have. For many of you watching, you probably already know, but I had a guest appearance on the Velocity chat room, which is the one that I use all the time anyway. And I was a guest speaker today, and that changed a lot of the physical setup I had in front of me, and it also kind of distracted my focus a little bit, at least in the beginning. But at the same time, coming off this day, like I said, I'm not super upset. I'm actually, I've already had a big fat sandwich, which was the key a couple of days ago. So I made myself another one of those as consolation. And as a tribute to Nick, the host of Velocity Trading, who is an American, I've just opened a terrible American beer, a Pabst Blue Ribbon, and that's going to be my consolation beer, I guess you could call it, for the result today, which is obviously not too stellar. But as I said, I mean, I'm really not bothered by this. It does certainly put a bit of a hit on my account. But all in all today, I feel emotionally as if I had a break-even day, or as if I closed with the $45 loss or so that I had booked pre-market. And the reason for that is because I had a lot of fun today. I had a lot of fun in the chat room. I saw a lot of people relating to what I'm doing right now, and that makes me pumped up. I saw recently that I think I'm up to like 35 subscribers, which is 33 new ones, which all of a sudden gives me an audience. And that is really exciting to me because it means there's 33 new people that I might be able to help. Before this, I was just building up content for the future and hoping to insert a bunch of extra videos other than recaps. And I haven't done that so far. I've been struggling a lot with that material. And I feel like having an audience all of a sudden might light a fire under me enough to actually make me throw that stuff out. And that stuff getting thrown out could possibly help people a lot more. And that's what this channel is all about. I'm not out here to sell anything. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I'm looking for people who I can invest in. If you're an up-and-coming trader, then you're exactly the kind of person that I'm looking for, and you are the reason why I launched this channel. However, I'll be leaving all that stuff for separate videos, exactly what the plan is here and all that stuff. So let's get into the trades from today, and I'll walk you through what my morning looked like. So here's a look at my trade log, scrolled down to the 3 trades that I took today. And my first 2 ones were on CLVS pre-market in a pretty tight time window of about 17 minutes. And the first one was one that I really like. I recognized an opportunity for a bottom bounce on a stock that had really good news and for some reason was selling off from its initial pop. And it started basing out around $4. It would bounce down to 4, get bought up, bounce down to 4, get bought up, and there wasn't a whole lot of resistance overhead. And so I decided to speculate a little bit with a bottom bounce, which is a setup I don't really play a whole lot of. But in this case, I thought the news would probably be enough to, make this a winner, even if it was just a small bounce. My initial target was only 15 cents or so, 20 cents. And I thought that I would be able to get that to happen pretty quickly. And additionally, with a risk level of $4, I was only risking 9 cents on this entry of 408. And even this entry of 408 was supposed to be 406, but I got a little bit of slippage on the entry. Now, the problem on this trade and the next one is that I flubbed my hotkey twice. Both times I took the wrong number of shares. This one was supposed to be 500 and this one was supposed to be 250. And as you can see, they're reversed. And this is pretty much the only thing that went wrong today as a result of my setup, my physical setup, in that my keyboard was a lot closer to my chair than I'm really used to having. And I didn't even notice the first one until after I closed the position. I didn't even notice that this was a mistake. It was only after I saw the P&L of only $18 that I was like, wait, what? And then I realized. And then on the second one, despite having realized it, I still made the same mistake and took double the share size instead of half. And sadly, this ended up working out the worst possible way in that, I took half the position on the winning trade and then got right back into it with double the position on what turned out to be a losing trade. And so these were two trades that probably should have been just one trade. Once again, that's very typical of me to, cut things into smaller chunks when they should probably just be one trade. I said the same thing yesterday, and yet I did it again today. And in my defense, I was in the middle of doing an audio test with Nick with my mic, and I was having some trouble setting things up. I wasn't sure about the volume. And during our test, some people that were listening said that I was too loud, and yet I had my settings almost all the way to the bottom. The volume right now is at like 5%, the gain is at like 1%, and I couldn't figure out what the problem was, so I was kind of distracted in this second one. I could have got out of this more or less break even at a time where I did actually notice that it wasn't going to work. I didn't end up doing that, and to be honest, looking back, like I'm really not that bothered about this loss. This was one where I made enough mistakes that I deserved the loss. I messed up the position size both times, and I took two trades that should have probably just been one. If I had just held this 408 position up to 426, which was my next entry, I would have pretty much sold at the top of the bottom bounce, and that would have been fine. But that's not what happened, and it was my fault that this happened, and so I was okay with that. Even though if I behaved perfectly, I would just not make any mistakes. Something I really want from myself, or from my results rather, is when I make a mistake, I want the trade to be red. And when I make a good decision, I want the trade to be green. And the reason for that is just because it makes it a lot easier to interpret my own results. If there are mistakes in my green trades and, really good behavior in my red trades, well then I have to rely on things like these recaps, which is okay, but having to absolutely rely on them in order to find these mistakes and then having to study all that material just to know whether or not this was a good trade or a bad trade is a lot more difficult. And so in this case, I made mistakes and I ended up red as a result of those mistakes. And so when I look back on this data, I'm going to look into it further, find I made a mistake, and then try to correct it going forward. And that's something that I really do want to see in my stats. So now this brings us to the trade on COLL. And where I found it was about right here on this 1 minute candle. And I noticed a bit of sideways consolidation following a low volume push from 1560 all the way up to 1874. I looked on the daily chart. I found I'll zoom out to show you. I found a little bit of reactions around here at $20 and at $18.91. So in between 19 and 20, there was a few problems. However, the one at $20 did not have a lot of volume, and so I didn't really consider this level to be especially valid. So this is more or less the situation I was looking at. I wanted to get in for a high of day breakout, which is definitely a go-to setup of mine. I'm definitely lean way more towards momentum than I do towards, bottom bounces and stuff like that. Buying against resistance, that's something I'll do occasionally if it's super clear cut. But I feel much more comfortable when it's a high of day breakout, following consolidation, following a rise up. And I got that exact pattern here. And the only thing that was missing was volume confirmation. And as you can see on this candle here that we're lined up with, there was a high of day volume on this candle. And I was watching this. And what I saw was a bunch of sellers getting broken repeatedly without any support on the bid side. Now, the lack of support on the bid side was a bit of a problem. However, I also noticed that there was a double bottom here at $19. And the first one was one that I did see, and it bounced pretty aggressively off that $19 level. And so $19 is where I decided to place my hard stop. And this is a little bit speculative because I was using inside candles as my reference to where I place my stop. Additionally, I was using the 1 minute chart, which is something I complained to myself about just yesterday. And it's something I do a lot, but in this case, I felt that the consolidation was so tight that it made a lot of sense. And the VWAP also at that time was lining up pretty well with the $19 level. And although I'm not a huge fan of technical indicators, the VWAP is most certainly the most popular technical indicator used. And if I just show you my level 2, you'll see that it's automatically given on the montage window. Whether or not you want it there, it's there. And so it's kind of an indicator that's force fed to people. And because of that, I feel that it's more likely to be reacted to than any other type of indicator. So getting back to the trade, there was, during this rise, the one piece of bid support that came up was at 1925. And when I saw that with a planned entry around 1960, I thought, okay, I can comfortably use 1925 as my primary stop, and then I'll use 19 as my hard stop. And that's what largely gave me the confidence to be able to take 125 shares as my first entry. Now, my plan on this revolved around pretty big expectations, I must admit. I was expecting, well, not expecting, but I was leaning towards aiming for a pretty high target. I found myself a little bit enticed by the halt level, which showed up on my level 2 at, I believe it was $22.30. So my thoughts going in were, okay, I'm going to take a low-risk starter at above 1950, and that'll be 125 shares. And then if we get up to that halt level, I can very comfortably add a half position, which would have been 62 shares, and would have only brought my average up into about $20.25. And if I had done that, I would be going into a halt at around $22.50 with an average almost $2 lower. And that would have been a great situation on 187 shares. It could have had the potential for a home run. And I really did feel at this time that there was home run potential on this trade. And so on the next candle, you can see we did break that level, and that's where I took my entry at 1953, as shown on my trades window right here. You can also see the volume was a little bit lower, and this was a topping tail 1 minute candle, which signifies a little bit of weakness. It popped up just below $20 and then came back down. And that's when I started having second thoughts. There was a pretty clear opportunity where I could have exited around 1970, and I didn't have a lot of time to think about it. I think I had maybe like 2.5 seconds to figure it out, and I couldn't come up with an answer in that time. And the only thing that really flashed through my mind was my trades on CNST yesterday, where I overreacted to moments like that, and it made me miss the bulk of the move. And so I decided in that moment that I didn't want to let that happen again, and that I would rather stop out at $19 and just take the hit than I would to miss out on what could be a $4 or $5 move on a multi-hundred share position. And if we fast forward the chart a little bit, you'll see the resistance continued happening, and then we started breaking down. And I started trying to stop out just below $19. I'll fast forward a little bit more so you can see the whole thing. But this rundown on these three candles, I really wish I had live video of this, because I think I tried like 6 or 7 times to get out. I kept hitting Control Z and again and again and again, and I'd cancel the order, hit Control Z. And I have to say, like, my reaction times were not bad. They weren't, sloppy at all. It reminded me a lot of, if you look back 2 days ago on day 21, on the live video that I shared on the recap of my trade on NXTC, my hotkey game was pretty on point there too. And that's a lot like what I was doing today here on this one. So I would put out an order to sell, and it wouldn't fill, and I'd cancel it, put out another order, and I kept hitting the bid too, and I still wasn't getting filled. And that's a big part of the reason why I wish I had a live video, because I feel like I should have been filled. It's kind of hazy in my memory, but I seem to remember that at 1908, there was a pop back up to 1908. I feel like there was a moment just below $19 where the bid should have filled my order and didn't. I'm probably wrong on this, because Dash Trader tends to be super accurate with their fills, even in the simulator. But it didn't happen for me this time. And so what ended up happening was I couldn't get filled all the way back to $18. And now at $18, we had broken below the low of the initial pullback, which made me really worried. It felt like, okay, this play is completely destroyed. Now this situation is just about damage control. And because I couldn't get filled during this drop back down, I decided to just exit half the position at $18. And as soon as I did that, I noticed that there was a fairly huge hidden buyer at $18. I noticed 10,000 share sell orders going through at $18, and nothing was budging on the level two. And this kept happening. There was a bunch of high frequency trades as well, like algorithmic trades that were going through 100 share positions, 200 share positions, and still $18 wasn't breaking. And if I fast forward, you can see this. It kind of bases out here at $18, and I thought, okay, this might actually work out. And so I continued holding the second half of my position, thinking that I might be able to limit the damage here if we get a pop back up. Other people might see this. They might be like, oh, here's support. And then they might get in as like an anticipation of the break of high of day. It would be a little bit of aggressive for them to be doing that. But at this point, I mean, I didn't have a lot to lose. I could either stop out for the rest at $18, selling right into a hidden buyer, which didn't make a ton of sense to me, or I could wait for the break of 18 and just be really quick on the trigger and get rid of my last position as soon as I saw 18 break. And the second of those two options is what ended up happening. And I was pretty quick. The level two below $18, that's the one thing that kind of bothered me, was there was only a few hundred shares in between 18 and 1750. And so I didn't really want to, compound the damage by letting myself go all the way down to 1750 and just surpass my stop even more. Because, at this point I'd surpassed my stop, or my hard stop, by a whole dollar, which is 200% of what it was supposed to be. And even, the primary stop that I had, which I kind of thought like I should have used, that was over 400% of my intended stop. So I didn't really want to let this one go too far. And as soon as it broke, as you can see by the red downward arrow, I did stop the rest at 1787. And that brought my losses up to almost $200, which was about 4 times what I had planned on this trade. And then after that, like I said in the beginning, I locked up my level 2. I was pretty much done for the day, or 100% done for the day once I suffered that loss. But I wasn't bothered by it at all. I mean, I realized right then and there that this wasn't really like a result of having a bad plan. It was just an unfortunate case of extreme slippage. And I'll go through the reason that this happened. It's all about my hotkey setup. So this setup is one that I love. It's one I've spent 2 years plus designing and refining, and it makes a lot of sense for the normal price range that I play. But when it gets into the higher price range, it can kind of work against me. And I think this hotkey setup is a big part of the reason why I could not get out today. And so the button that I kept hitting was this one right here, sell all at the bid minus 1 penny. And because the offset is only 1 penny, that was the problem here. Now, on stocks where the spreads are typically just 1 penny to 5 pennies, this works out okay for me because the slippage isn't realistically going to be more than that. And so I only give myself an offset of 2 pennies, or of 1 penny rather, in order to make sure that I get that fill when the time comes to panic sell. And in this case, I was trying to panic sell and I couldn't because the offset just wasn't big enough for the price of the stock. And so this certainly contributed to the failure to exit today. But overall, I mean, in order to fix this, I would have to go into my hotkey window, change everything, and then, save the changes and then go back. And then during that time, I would have missed the tape. I would have missed all kinds of different patterns, stuff on the level 2. There could have been all kinds of information that I would have missed. And so I don't really have an intention to change anything about this. I think if I were to have, changed my decision on this trade, if there's one thing I could have changed, is that I think I should have got out of this trade at 1925. Because once this topping tail took place here, and then once we didn't recover from that drop back down and the volume started weakening, I think really that was my cue to exit. You can see we based out in the 30s here a little bit, hit the 30s, came back up into 73, and then came back down to 26, and then the next candle we dropped. And I think on this candle, I probably should have exited in the low 19s. On the other hand, however, that is a pretty results oriented way to look at it, and I don't think that's the way to go. I think it's your whatever you do has to be a valid theory across all the possible situations, and I think across all the possible situations, especially given the fact that we did have two-digit price runners in the last 2 days that have exploded. This was a moderately similar setup to those plays. And even though the daily chart was dramatically different in this case, which is probably the thing that I should have been looking at, even though the daily chart was different, I do feel like the risk reward that I was setting myself up for was okay. Because I was only risking initially $50. It just sucks that, I got all that slippage. So I'm going to be opening tomorrow around $2,500 in equity. And like I said, on this awful snowball day, which was day number 13, October 17th, I don't really get bothered by that kind of thing. I do consider myself even at all times. And so opening at 2,500 to me, it's just like deleting, 1.5 times yesterday's result. And that's not that big of a deal to me. I'm still up on the week, and that to me is a positive that I'm taking away from this negative. And so to close this video out, I'm going to mention that I just actually rewatched a couple of the recaps. I noticed a lot of you watched the first one, and I watched it too, and then I watched the second one, and I was like, man, these are terrible. And so I definitely encourage you to start from the beginning and suffer through the early ones. I did get better pretty quickly, I do believe. But for those of you who don't have the patience to do that, which is probably not a good thing if you're trying to learn how to trade, but just in case you don't have the patience to do that, I'm going to be looking through them for the ones I think have the highest educational value. And I'm going to post a comment on this video that will have links to all the ones that I think are the best. And so if you are a little bit short on patience or a little bit short on time, you'll be able to see the comments in this video of the ones up to date that I think are the most valuable to a beginner trader. So hopefully tomorrow, even though it's Friday, I'm going to have some sort of good news. Honestly, my hopes right now are set as low as just have a break-even day. That's what I'm looking for really tomorrow. If I can book a couple scalps and pull a bit of green out of it, so be it. But I definitely want to avoid any major catastrophes tomorrow. I don't want to go into the weekend with 2 big red days in a row, that's for sure. And so, Nick, if you happen to be watching, thanks again for having me on the stream. And to all of you who subscribed, thank you for your support. And I certainly hope to make it worth your while. So until next time, guys, happy trading. And this is Alex saying I will see you next time.